Hi everyone, my name is Ashnita Bali and I'm a Women Tech Makers Ambassador. Today in this video, I would like to talk to you about quite a common topic really in web development, which is CSS and HTML. I would like to look at it from a different perspective. I would like to explore this idea about how we don't just use CSS to create beautiful pages, but the styles we apply to the user interface, to our HTML elements, give visual cues to users on how to interact with the page, how to understand the layout of the page, the hierarchy, navigate and find the content on a page that the user is interested in. Besides that, I would like to also talk about how we use semantic HTML to provide the same sort of affordances that are available to visual UI, but in a semantic way. So, for example, a user who cannot see the screen can use a screen reader and get all the information available to them on how to interact, navigate, and understand a page. Let's start off with exploring and looking a bit deeper about what are affordances. When we think about how designers design a product, they would have to think about how the target users would interact with this product. An affordance is a relationship between the properties of an object and the capabilities of the agent that determine how the object could possibly be used. This is quite a long explanation, so let me try and break it down a little bit and explain it in parts. Agent here refers to the target audience or the target users. They can be people, animals, a machine, or computer system, for example. Capabilities refers to, for example, the person's ability to be able to perform the actions that the object affords. So it's much easier if we have a look at an example object, and teapots are a really cool example to explain affordance, because just the design of the teapot lets the user intuitively know how to interact with it. So the spout and the handle are the properties of the teapot. Spout affords the content being poured out, and the handle affords being lifted up. So by just looking at the teapot, we intuitively know that we can pick it up by the handle, tilt it, and the contents will pour out from the spout. And we don't really need any instructions on how to use it, because the design has provided those visual affordances to us. We pretty much do the same in our user interface. So in the early days when the GUI elements were created, folks would have decided about how to represent the different parts of a page, like for example, the different interactions that can happen, entering some input, selecting from a set of choices, making just one selection, making multiple selections. At some point, we got used to having the graphical user interface elements looking a certain way. And just by looking at an element, we know what interaction we can expect to do here. I try to ask the AI to create some sort of visual representation of how the different GUI elements would have appeared in the early systems. And it has created some diagram, which I think it looks cool. It's a little bit harder to understand what the different parts are, but the main idea is that, over time, all these GUI elements have evolved, and we get used to just by looking at it, and we now we don't need instructions, let's say, on how to use it. We just look at a page and we are familiar with the user interface elements. I think at this point, let's have a look at some code so we can code up some UI elements. Okay, I have my code pen open here. So let's try and do some coding very quickly. Header, I want to have a H1. Let's say we're making a awesome conference. And let's have a main element and have a form with some input. And I want to create a radio button. So let's have a field set legend. Let's say choose your t-shirt size. Let's say we have a form for the speakers to fill in, and they can choose a few different things like the t-shirt size. Now label, I'm going to nest the actual radio button in the label. So let's say small input, type is radio, name is t-shirt. And let's just copy this a couple more times for a few different sizes so we can have small, medium, and large. As you can see, the page rendered on the side, I haven't actually added any CSS for this page, but we have got a radio button and a field set, and we know that radio buttons are sort of circles. And looking at that, I know that choose one from a set of options here. So if I select one, I'll be more medium. When I select one, then I visual cue to say that this is the option I've selected. I've got a blue filled in circle inside that outer circle. Where are the styles actually coming from? There is the styles from the user agent style sheet. The field set also has a whole lot of styles that come from the user agent. The radio buttons, as we see, have got the styles as well. If I created a checkbox, I would get visual appearance. So let's see if I can maybe copy this and say, what activities would you like to do? And let's say it's checkbox dinner, and then speakers dinner. Let's say the speakers are invited for dinner, checkbox. And what else? City tour. Let's say tour. Have another one, say jogging, morning jog. What's rendered on this screen, we see that we have boxes to say this is a choice between different options, and we can choose more than one. So I can choose to say, yes, I'll do all of them. And the chosen options have a tick next to them. Right, so this is all the visual, the cues that our styles give a person who can see the screen, and it helps you understand what's happening and get your feedback on what you've done, the interactions you've done. As you know, not all users can see the screen, so how can we provide the similar sort of affordances to people who use, for example, a screen reader? Not all users are able to see the screen, so how can we provide the same affordances available to a visual UI in a non-visual, in a more semantic UI, for example, in a screen reader? When I first started learning about HTML, the HTML5 has just come out. So there was a whole lot of talk about and discussions about the new semantic elements, the sort of landmark elements such as main, aside, footer, nav, header, all these elements. So I very naively and as a newbie misunderstood semantic HTML to mean that it was for writing declarative code, meaning we use these elements to say there's a header, main, aside, footer, etc., and the code is sort of easier to read, and we easily understand what's happening in our HTML code, and it reads more like a story rather than all confusing with all the divs, etc. I, for a whole while, did not quite realize that these HTML elements actually have this semantic side of things, meaning that the element carries accessibility information with them. So each element has got a role, a whole set of properties and state. captures that information that's available in the UI. For example, we saw when I checked on a checkbox, then we could see a tick, and that same sort of state kind of feedback is available to screen readers through the state information in the accessibility information that goes along with an element. What happens is that the browser takes the HTML that we have written and creates the rendering path, like the DOM, the CSS object model, the render tree, layout tree, and then paints a visual UI. But as well as that, it does a second UI path. It takes document object model and creates a parallel tree structure called the accessibility tree. The accessibility tree is a whole tree of nodes. The nodes are accessible objects. So the accessible objects have got properties, which I mentioned before, role and a whole lot of properties, its state information. So one of the main important properties is the accessible name, for example. Let me attempt at having a look at this with a screen reader.
Small radio button. 1 of 3. Choose your t-shirt size. Group. You are currently on a radio button. 1 of 3. To select this option, press Control Option Space. Selected. Speakers dinner. Unticked. Tick box. What activities would you like to do? Group. You are currently on a tick box. To select or deselect this tick box, press Control Option Space. Ticked. City tour. Unticked. Tick box. You are currently on a tick box. Unticked. Tick box. You are currently on a ticked. Voiceover off.
Okay. As we saw in my demo, the screen reader is able to use the accessibility tree, all the accessible information available on each of the HTML elements, and announce a audio UI. So I can know by hearing what element I'm in. It would say the role, for example, the checkbox, the name of it. So I knew that it was, speaker's dinner, for example, and checked or unchecked. And it gave me interactions that were available for me on how to select an option. This is the beautiful thing about web. It is for everyone. At some points in our life, we go through different things as we age. People start having more and more sight impairments or hearing, etc. And we can have situational sort of disabilities, for example, ear injury or an eye infection. The great thing about web is that no matter who the user is and their ability, everyone has the same sort of chance to be able to consume web content, to interact with it. And as developers, we have the job to make sure our the web applications we make is really accessible and rich in user experience to everyone. As a sort of closing remark, I would like to say about what Tim Berners-Lee said, that the power of the web is in its universality. Access by everyone is an essential aspect, and HTML as the language that we use to build web applications is designed from the very start to be accessible. Each of the HTML elements has semantic information that comes with it. So all we pretty much have to do as web developers is make sure we use the right element for the right sort of content. And that's it. Happy coding. Thank you very much.